What if everything you ever thought you controlled, every decision, every choice, wasn't truly yours to begin with? Is it possible that every step you've taken was scripted by a higher design, leaving your free will a mere illusion? Or do we indeed have the power to shape our lives in ways that even God might not anticipate? Today, we're venturing straight into one of the most provocative spiritual debates of all time. God's plan versus our free will. Chapter 1. The controversial question. Ask any person of faith, or even someone who identifies as spiritual but not religious, and you'll find opinions all over the map. Some insist that God has laid out every detail of your journey, from birth to final breath. Others argue we're completely free to follow or ignore the divine as we please. And then there's a middle ground, suggesting God's plan is an overarching blueprint, but each human is granted the freedom to customize the details. Could the concept of free will itself be a grand illusion, something we cling to out of pride? Or, on the flip side, might it be that imagining we have no control allows us to avoid responsibility for our lives? Chapter 2. Diving into the core paradox. Part 1. God's omniscience. Many religious traditions describe God as all-knowing past, present, and future. If that's true, does God's knowledge automatically negate our freedom? Some argue that just because God knows the outcome, it doesn't mean he forces it. Think of a parent watching a toddler walk toward a puddle. The parent can predict the child might slip, but the child still has the choice to walk or not. So, knowledge isn't necessarily dictation, and knowing doesn't always mean controlling. Part 2. Free will as a gift. Others believe that free will is the greatest gift God could bestow, allowing us to grow, learn, and love authentically. If we were puppets on strings, how genuine would our faith or devotion be? True love, by definition, must be freely given. If your every move is predetermined, does love lose its essence? Part 3. Predestined versus chosen. Then there's the view of predestination, which claims our paths, even our salvation, are already set. Those who are chosen will inevitably follow God, while others are destined for a different fate. This outlook can be comforting for some if you believe you're among the chosen, but devastating for others who feel locked out of God's plan from birth. Chapter 3. The tug of war within us. Why do we obsess over this question? Because it touches at the very heart of our struggles. We want to know if our trials and triumphs have a deeper meaning. Are we suffering because it's part of God's greater design? Or is our suffering merely the result of our own unwise choices? Part 1. Blaming the fate. It's all in God's hands can become a spiritual shield that blocks us from personal responsibility. If everything is God's doing, where does our accountability fit in? It's easy to push blame upward, never looking deeper into our own hearts or behaviors. Part 2. Carrying excessive guilt. Conversely, some individuals internalize everything, believing every misstep is 100% their fault. This leads to crippling guilt and shame. They imagine a watchful God who's disappointed in their every choice, further spiraling into spiritual anxiety. Both extremes can trap you in a mental prison, one that either denies your power, blaming fate, or denies God's grace, excessive guilt. The truth often lies in the tension between these two extremes. Chapter 4. A biblical and spiritual perspective. For those rooted in Judeo-Christian scriptures, the Bible offers numerous paradoxes on this subject. On one hand, it says we are predestined Ephesians 1-5. Yet it also urges us to choose this day whom you will serve. This duality can be puzzling. How can we be predestined to do something we must also freely choose? Part 1. God's desire versus human will. One spiritual perspective is that God's plan is like a broad river flowing toward the ocean. You can jump into the current and let it carry you, or try swimming upstream. Either way, the river's direction remains the same, but your experience changes based on whether you align with the flow or resist it. Part 2. Co-creation. In many esoteric traditions, humans are considered co-creators with God. The divine sets the stage, but you decide how you'll dance upon it. It's not that God has no say, he wrote the music, but you still choose the choreography. Chapter 5. The spiritual purpose of free will. Let's shift from theoretical debate to practical spirituality. Part 1. Growth through choice. True spiritual growth happens when you actively choose compassion over indifference, forgiveness over vengeance, faith over cynicism. It's in the forging of these choices that your soul expands, much like muscles growing stronger by resistance training. Part 2. Karmic lessons. In Eastern philosophies, free will and karma go hand in hand. Every action sets in motion consequences that shape future experiences. You're free to sow whatever seeds you like, but you're not free from reaping the harvest they produce. Part 3. Divine partnership. Using your will to align with God's will can transform your life into a conscious partnership with the divine. You actively participate in the creation of beauty, harmony, and love in the world. This synergy can be seen as the highest form of prayer, where your life itself becomes an offering. Chapter 6. Recognizing illusions in the material world. It's easy to interpret free will through a purely material lens, choosing this job over that job, these clothes over those clothes. But when the spiritual dimension is neglected, we risk confusing superficial decisions with deeper soul choices. Part 1. The illusion of control. You might diligently plan your life, only to be blindsided by unforeseen events, accidents, losses, and global crises. So, do you actually control anything? In these moments, the arrogance of an "I can control everything" mindset melts away. But losing illusions of control isn't the same as losing free will. It simply reveals that we operate within certain cosmic boundaries. Part 2. The illusion of helplessness. On the flip side, some people conclude, if I can't control everything, there's no point in trying. This defeatist outlook can become its own trap, one that robs you of your innate power to make meaningful changes. Perhaps we are neither omnipotent nor entirely powerless. Our choices are real, but they unfold within a reality orchestrated by a higher intelligence. The masterpiece is God's, yet each brushstroke is ours to apply. Chapter 7. Bridging the gap, a path forward. So, how do we navigate this paradox in our daily lives? Part 1. Surrender and action. Rather than choosing between "it's all God's plan" or "it's all on me," consider embracing both. Take responsible action in every situation, then surrender the outcome to God. This balance helps you walk the fine line between helplessness and arrogance. Part 2. Discernment through prayer. When you're unsure whether a path is part of God's plan or your own illusion, bring it to prayer or meditation. Ask for clarity, but more importantly, be willing to listen. Part 3. Accept mystery. Not every spiritual truth will neatly fit into your mind's logic. Sometimes you have to live the questions without forcing immediate answers. Embrace the mystery that God's ways are infinitely wiser than ours. Chapter 8: Final Insights and Empowerment. At the heart of this free will debate is a profound truth. You are intimately connected to a loving source that desires your growth, your joy, and your communion. What if the real purpose of free will isn't just to make random choices, but to choose alignment with God's love? That's where the illusion shatters and true freedom begins. The answer may lie in the tension between surrender and conscious participation. Don't let the debate paralyze you. Let it deepen your faith, sharpen your awareness, and illuminate your path. In choosing to align your will with the divine, you step into the flow of grace, where life's greatest miracles unfold. If this message has sparked new insights, share it with someone who's wrestling with questions of destiny and free will. Together, let's explore what it means to co-create a life guided by purpose, love, and the immeasurable wisdom of the divine. May your choices bring you ever closer to the heart of God's plan and reveal the power of true freedom.